What if the secret to never being upset by others isn't about changing them, but about understanding a single, profound illusion? This question, once truly contemplated, can unravel a lifetime of conditioned suffering. We spend our days as amateur architects, frantically trying to redesign the world and everyone in it, convinced that our peace depends on the perfection of our external environment. We sand down rough edges, paint over unpleasant colors, and demand that others conform to the blueprints we carry in our minds. Yet, the foundation of the house we live in, our own consciousness, remains shaky and neglected. You've likely been taught, both explicitly and implicitly, that your feelings are direct, causal products of the world outside. A harsh word from a colleague, a frustrating traffic delay, a perceived slight from a loved one. These events are seen as invaders, external forces that storm the gates of your inner peace and steal it from you. This belief, so deeply ingrained it feels like common sense, is in fact the very engine of your suffering. It places the locus of your control entirely outside yourself, making you a permanent victim of circumstance, a leaf tossed on the capricious winds of other people's moods and life's unpredictability. But the truth, which can feel radical and even nonsensical to the conditioned mind, is this: no external event can create a reaction within you that wasn't already waiting there, latent and poised like a string on an instrument. The disturbance you feel, the jangle of nerves, the heat of anger, doesn't come from the pluck itself, but from the pre-existing tension in the string. The world doesn't create your reactions. It merely reveals the tuning of your own instrument. When you try to fight against life's inevitable irritations, you are not addressing the cause. You are merely tightening that string further, increasing its potential for a more violent, discordant vibration next time. You become tangled in the very struggle you hoped would free you, a fly fighting the web instead of noticing the space between the threads. The pursuit of serenity, then, is not found by building higher walls or crafting better armor. Armor is heavy, it rusts, and it separates you from the full experience of life. True peace is discovered when you undertake a fundamental investigation into the one you are trying to protect. It emerges when you realize there is no separate, solid you that needs to be defended from experience. Consider the mountain. The wind howls around its peaks, the rain lashes its slopes, the sun bakes its stone. The mountain does not tense up against the weather. It does not take the storms personally. It remains unmoved and unbothered, not because it is hard or uncaring, but because it is vast and rooted. In the same way, feelings of anger, annoyance, and hurt arise and pass through the vastness of your awareness. They are weather patterns in your inner sky, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but they are not the sky itself. Your reactions are visitors, not the home in which you live. To believe otherwise is to confuse the furniture for the foundation of the house. To be truly undisturbed, therefore, is not to become a stone devoid of feeling. It is to see, with startling clarity, that the solid, continuous self you've been defending, the one that gets insulted, praised, and worried, is more like a mirage. It is a collection of memories, habits, and thoughts, woven together by a narrative you didn't even realize you were writing. The key to dismantling this illusion lies in a space so subtle that most people miss it entirely. The tiny, silent gap that exists in the instant after a provoking event, and before your mind launches into its well-rehearsed story of judgment, defense, and blame. Most people are like leaves caught in a storm, tossed instantly from event to reaction. There is no pause, only a seamless, unconscious transition. But if you can cultivate the witness, you will notice that gap. It is a fleeting moment of pure experience, untainted by commentary. In that sacred pause, before the internal noise begins, your true freedom is waiting. It is the space where choice resides. The event itself is empty, neutral. A word, an action. They carry no inherent emotional meaning. You are the one who, through a lifetime of conditioning, gives them their power. If someone calls you a name, it only lands, it only stings, if You unconsciously agree with the identity they are describing. If you do not hold that self-concept, the word dissolves into nothingness, mid-air, having nothing to attach to, no purchase on the facade of yourself. So the entire endeavor of life shifts dramatically. It ceases to be a futile campaign to control the uncontrollable external world. Instead, it becomes a gentle, moment-to-moment practice of witnessing your internal landscape with compassionate curiosity. It is about seeing the thought of resentment arise and simply deciding, I see you, but I do not have to follow you. Resentment, like a fire, only persists when you feed it your attention, when you fan the flames with mental arguments and imagined confrontations. Stop participating in the story, and the feeling, deprived of fuel, will flicker and fade back into the emptiness from which it came. Choosing not to react is not a sign of passivity or weakness. It is the mark of profound wisdom and immense strength. It means you have remembered that you were never meant to be a puppet, your strings pulled by the hands of circumstance. You are the awareness behind the puppet, the silent space in which the entire drama unfolds. A deep, often hidden root of human pain is the quiet, persistent belief that other people should act differently. We live with a hidden, internal expectation that the world will conform to our private, unspoken rulebook. But here is the cosmic joke. Nobody else has read it. They are living by their own scripts, shaped by their own wounds and conditioning, completely unaware of the part you have written for them in your personal play. Expecting others to follow your rules is like standing on the riverbank and demanding the water flow uphill. It is a recipe for perpetual frustration. And when people inevitably act from their own nature when they are late, or selfish, or forgetful, we feel a sense of personal offense, as if the cosmos itself has broken a sacred law. But it hasn't. That feeling of outrage is just the mind protesting, shouting, "This should not be!" But it is. The moment you stop demanding that life be polite, a tremendous weight lifts from your shoulders. You begin to chuckle at the fierce seriousness with which you once took everyone else's performance. And that gentle laughter is the sound of your own freedom returning. When you release the need for others to act like you, a second, more profound liberation follows. You no longer require their agreement. Disagreement is not a personal attack. It is simply the natural, beautiful diversity of consciousness expressing itself. The same creative, intelligent force that creates twisted, majestic pines on a windswept cliffside creates unique, sometimes contradictory perspectives in human minds. It is a peculiar form of arrogance to demand that everyone see the world from your window, when their view faces an entirely different horizon. Our deepest interpersonal struggles rarely come from what people actually do. They come from our frantic, often desperate need for them to validate our perspective, to confirm our reality. So before we can find peace with anyone else, we must first loosen our white-knuckled grip on being right. We are addicted to the feeling of certainty. We debate and defend this fragile fortress called my opinion, pouring all our energy into its upkeep. But what if the purpose of life isn't to win an argument, but to experience the grand, mysterious dance? Every time you insist on being right, you automatically force someone else into the role of being wrong. You divide the world into allies and adversaries, a battlefield created entirely by your own need for psychological security. Truth is not a possession to be held. It is a current that moves through all of us. When you cease your desperate chase for it, you may find it has been sitting quietly beside you all along. When you drop the compulsion to be right, you can finally listen, not to gather ammunition for a counterattack, but to understand, to connect, to see through another's eyes. And in that space of open listening, you discover that peace does not come from victory in battle, but from laying down your weapons upon realizing that the war was an illusion you were perpetuating. Let others hold tightly to their certainties. Let them have the win. The person who no longer needs to win has already found the only prize that matters. And when you no longer need to be right, you'll notice a remarkable shift. the opinions of others begin to lose their weight and their power to hook you. For so long, our sense of being right was inextricably tied to our sense of being a self. When that constructed self feels threatened, even a mild difference of opinion can feel like an existential attack. But once you stop defending this mental image, the attack becomes mere sound, and your inner sky remains clear, vast, and undisturbed. You see that what people say about you is ultimately a story emerging from the landscape of their own world, their own hurts and beliefs. If you mistake their story for your reality, you will spend a lifetime trying to edit a book you did not write. It is strange, isn't it, how much authority we grant to mere vibrations in the air. A comment, a label, a thoughtless remark, and our entire sense of identity can shudder and contract. We take their words and stitch them into our skin, then wonder why we feel so scarred and heavy. But what, precisely, is being wounded? The sound waves fade. The air is still. All that remains is your interpretation of the event, your memory of it, the story you tell about it. The sting doesn't reside in their voice. It lives in your memory, kept alive by your repeated attention to it. When someone says you are inadequate, that statement reveals far more about their own inner state of lack and judgment than it does about your own. Why would you let their temporary internal storm define your inner climate? To rely on another's praise for your sense of worth is equally precarious. It is to build your house on sand, vulnerable to the next tide of opinion. True independence begins when you realize that no external assessment, whether critical or adoring, has anything to do with your essential nature. Because who you are is not a concept to be defined. It is the aware, silent space that exists before any thought arises. And awareness, by its very nature, cannot be praised or insulted. It simply is. Now, this perspective is not an invitation to let people walk all over you while you pretend to be enlightened. That is a profound misunderstanding. Compassion without discernment becomes self-betrayal, and peace without clear boundaries is just spiritual bypassing a disguised form of avoidance. Guarding your energy isn't about constructing fortress walls of fear. It's about recognizing and honoring the natural, intelligent border of your own being. You can be open-hearted and hospitable to guests without allowing them to move into your sacred inner space and rearrange the furniture. Many people confuse being kind with always saying yes. They think spiritual maturity means being infinitely accommodating, endlessly patient, and perpetually drained. But even the moon has its phases of darkness, and the tide its necessary ebbs. To have a rhythm is to be natural. Limits are not rejections of others. They are the honest expression of your own natural rhythm and capacity. When you say no, you are not refusing the other person. You are honoring the truth of your own being. Because if you give from an empty well, you offer not generosity, but future resentment in disguise. It's a curious discovery. When you finally stop over giving from a place of obligation, life doesn't collapse. It gracefully reorganizes itself around the new stable center of your tranquility. And tranquility, unlike worldly achievement, requires no effort to deserve. It is your birthright. So, protect your vitality, not by closing your heart down, but by deepening your roots in your own unwavering presence. Like an ancient, deeply rooted tree, you can sway with great force without losing your connection to the ground. When you no longer feel compelled to defend a mental image of yourself, you may find that a quiet, grounded presence speaks more powerfully than any words ever could. This isn't the silence of suppression or fear. It's the silence that naturally emerges when there are simply no more internal arguments to be made, no more selves to defend. Most people imagine power as loudness, as forceful declaration and domination. But real, unassailable power can sound like absolute quiet, because reality does not need to convince anyone. It simply is. When someone hurls their anger at you, what happens if you don't catch it? It falls at your feet, inert and harmless. And in that conscious stillness, something magical unfolds. There, outrage echoes only in the chamber of their own mind. while your own inner world remains as calm and clear as a deep, still mountain lake. You see, silence is not surrender. It is a conscious, powerful choice not to enroll in another's chaos. It is not weakness, it is sovereignty. It is the unspoken, lived statement. I will not be conscripted into your battle. When you cease reacting, the frantic world seems to slow down around you. You find you no longer feel the compulsive need to win debates or prove your point. You only need to be quiet enough to hear the constant, gentle hum of existence that plays beneath all the surface drama. And that hum, that quiet background music of life, is what everyone is desperately searching for in achievements, relationships, and substances, not realizing it is the very substance of their own being. When you stop rushing to explain or defend, you begin to perceive people differently. They cease to be blockades on your path and become mirrors, reflecting back at you the contents of your own consciousness. Every annoyance, every criticism, it is the universe, in its infinite wisdom, showing you a part of yourself that is still holding on, still identified, still believing in the separate self. That is why some comments hurt deeply and others roll off your back. The pain can only stick where there is a hidden, unexamined wound. So instead of resenting the reflector, look closely and with great curiosity at what has been revealed. You might find the world isn't hostile at all. It is simply a perfect, if sometimes harsh, teacher, illuminating the very places where you are not yet free. The individuals who irritate you the most are frequently your most valuable, albeit uninvited, spiritual guides. They point directly and with unerring accuracy to the exact spot where your freedom is waiting to be claimed. And once you understand this, you stop taking their behavior so personally. The next time someone tries to provoke you, you might even feel a spark of gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for the clear, unmistakable signpost they have provided, showing you another knot within your own heart that you can now, with compassion, begin to untie. That is the great, liberating secret. People lose their power to upset you the moment you see they were never your true opponents. They were only mirrors, perfectly positioned to help you see yourself more clearly. And when you start to see everyone and everything as a mirror, a gentler, more compassionate understanding blooms within you. You eventually stop needing the reflection altogether. You no longer cling to the identity of the student, the serene one, the unbothered one, or even the awakened one, for these, too, are just roles, more subtle layers of the self trying to improve itself. Letting go isn't a forceful action you perform. It's what naturally occurs when you finally, exhaustedly, stop grasping. Just as a tired hand will naturally release a heavy object it has been carrying for too long, a weary heart will naturally release its burdens when it truly tires of the exhausting pretense of control. Letting go is not something you do. It is what happens when you stop holding on. You see, frustration, anger, and hurt are simply the mind's primitive, desperate way of shouting, I refuse to accept reality as it is in this moment. But when you finally see the utter futility and pointlessness of this refusal, when you stop insisting with all your might that life be different than it is, everything becomes beautifully, breathtakingly simple. People do what they do. The world turns as it turns. Events unfold according to causes and conditions you can scarcely comprehend. And you, the vast, aware space in which all of this appears, you remain fundamentally undisturbed, like the open sky that holds every passing cloud and storm without being damaged, defined, or diminished by them. To let go is not to condone harmful behavior or to forget injustice. It is to awaken from a dream and see, with crystal clarity, that there was never a separate, solid self to be offended in the first place. The drama of life continues. The actors play their parts with great passion, and you, at last, can watch from the silent audience of your own awareness, smiling a gentle, knowing smile, understanding it was all a magnificent, fleeting play from the very beginning. And in that smile, you find the unshakable freedom you were seeking all along. Nothing and no one can truly bother you when you finally stopped confusing the stage, the costumes, and the script for who you really are.